Thank you very much indeed. Right, let's get to what's happening in the world's second largest economy. And China's economic outlook for the second half of this year will likely be determined by the government's shaking control over coronavirus outbreaks and the property market. Joining me now is Professor Keyu, a professor of economics at the London School of Economics, who joins us out of Beijing. Keyu, thank you for joining us this morning. This remarkable prospect then of homeowners stopping paying their mortgages. We've seen, of course, property companies and their bonds under pressure, the banks themselves being called in by regulators to try and address this problem. That the housing market of China has been written off many times before, and it's never quite happened. They've always managed to sustain the housing market broadly. Is this time different? How do you see this playing out?
It's a constant process of fine-tuning and adjusting, just as we've seen with financial deleveraging in the past few years. I think there's a real serious commitment to deliver on the message that houses are to be lived in rather than to be, making financial gains on. And the government has been serious, but as it's always been the case, there's an over-dialing, maybe an overreaction. And of course, property sector accounts for, by some accounts, 25% to 30% of economic output. Local governments' coffers rely on the property sector. The whole consumer sector, confidence from business to households, all depend on the property sector. And now they are readjusting and taking back a few steps and easing policy. And, it's really ironic that it used to be so difficult to buy a second home. The Chinese have come up with all kinds of creative measures to meet the requirements. And now the government is trying to instill confidence and encourage them. But this is not going to be enough.
Yeah, not long ago that we saw people putting in place at least divorces, at least on paper, to enable them to do that and buy second homes. Now things are changing. We're seeing falling sales. Just to be clear, Professor, do you think they have a grip on this, or is there a risk that this runs out of control? You talked about the fact that regulations often go over the threshold and then they dial it back a bit. Is this time different? How much confidence do you have that they can maintain this, contain this, or are they facing a Lehman moment?
They're trying to build confidence in the economy, confidence for the household and homeowners and home buyers and companies, etc. But this takes time. It takes time for that sentiment to recover. But time is not afforded to non-state developers on the burst of collapse, outright defaults potentially. And a lot of the debt that they hold is dollar-denominated debt, which is, of course, much more difficult to renegotiate and resolve. So it will take a lot of aggressive measures to be able to solve, to salvage the situation. And I'm just worried that timing is just not going to be enough. Yeah.
OK, so really question marks around the timing of all of this. The other reporting that we've been doing, our team on the ground in Beijing and Shanghai, is around the flow of talent out of China, the wealthy and those innovators and creators and entrepreneurs. Does China risk a loss of talent and a loss of some of the secret sauce that's driven so much of the innovation that's driven this economy in the last couple of decades?
In the short term, and this has also a lot to do with the stringent COVID policies. The pendulum often swings in one direction and quickly swings in the other direction with even greater verve. I'm still quite sanguine about the dynamic entrepreneurialism in China. The opportunities there, the markets are huge. The government has come out to say give active public support for technology companies. They will return. I think it has a lot to do with the near-term policies. But in the longer term, China's open for business.
That's an interesting take, and that kind of brings me on to my next question, which is that we remember the 1990s, and we remember Jiang Zemin and this kind of unofficial agreement between Jiang Zemin, the head of the country at the time, and entrepreneurs and the business elite, that they could work together. Has that unofficial agreement started to fray, do you think?
There is a new paradigm in the Chinese economy, and it's important to understand what it is. It's about severing the links between power and money, and we're likely going to see that taking into more speed and more importance going forward. That means the companies are going to be reined in more. They're going to be monitored, surveilled. much more than before, where they were given practically a free rein during the Deng Xiaoping era and in the Jiang Zemin era as well. Not so anymore. Big corporations going to be constrained. But again, that doesn't really necessarily hurt entrepreneurial dynamism. It's just that they're going to have to operate in tighter regulatory grounds than before. And we're less likely going to see these explosive unicorns, going from zero to tens of $billions in 3 years. That kind of phenomenon is less likely going to happen. But you can bet that the young entrepreneurs are still as excited as before to create value in society.
Okay, that excitement is still there. I'm also thinking back to the kind of hard-nosed reformer of Zhu Rongji again, the 1990s, early 2000s. Is there a Zhu Rongji of the moment to help China correct its economic course and get back to that growth target of about 5.5%?
Well, sometimes it has to get much worse before it really gets better and the pendulum swings in the other direction. And we can potentially see that. Now, I'm not hoping that the Chinese economy is going to slip even more going forward. But if it does, then I think there will be a full embracement of economic pragmatism in the near future. But I think that this is really, again, a process of learning and adaptation, even with stringent COVID policies, is getting to know the virus and getting to know how to deal with the virus. And so we're less likely going to see, I believe, full lockdowns that we have seen in the past, but now there's smarter ways, more efficient ways to deal with it, and then they're just going to have to adapt to the new circumstance.
Okay, Keyu Jin, Professor of Economics at LSE, always insightful on the economics and politics of China, the pendulum swing as we watch that regulatory response to, of course, the real estate sector, technology and COVID-0. Thank you very much indeed. Coming up.